elves, no zombies, and no wet shirts. Darn. Although there is a joke about the wet shirts in here, there's not a joke about the zombies. I just want to, first of all, pay tribute to George Washington, which is why we're here. And Jim Reese and I, for many years, have had a running joke about George Washington was a farmer. And it took a long time to sort of guide Jim over to that. And he admitted to me earlier this year, or late last year, that in fact, all of the books on George Washington's desks were about farming. I could have told him that. Anything else you can learn? Farming changes so often, and there's such a, just every day there's a different problem in a different way, that those books were there for a reason. It was not a decorative exercise. I also want to talk a little bit about farmer, because I think that farmer does not mean today what it meant then, and this was actually a misinterpretation of 18th century vocabulary was what started me in the direction that eventually led to the Chawton House Library and the Center for the Study of Early English Women's Writing that is located in Jane Austen's brother's estate in Hampshire, England. Farmer, from roughly the 16th century through probably the first quarter of the 19th century, meant not only a member of the landed gentry. Farmer indicated that you had land, you owned land, and you owned enough land that you were way beyond the tithing stage, that you derived your income from the land. And it was, and I was trying to think of a modern analog. In the last few years of the 18th century into the 19th century, if you were an industrialist, or now you would be an entrepreneur. Those are what we tend to call people that are at the forefront of society. They're moving society, they're creating wealth in society. They're generally making things better for all of us. And it's a very commendable term. And back when George Washington was a farmer, it indicated many things that have been lost in our knowledge of what a farmer was. A farmer was a landed gentleman responsible for sometimes hundreds of lives and hundreds of families and the people in his care. And the quality of his farming was measured in ways that we don't think about. One, which was sort of my goal, how many months of the year you had fresh fruit. And it's this whole pineapple thing. I still can't grow a pineapple in January, and I've got the highway and Walmart and Federal Express and everything else. These guys were producing from, the late Georgian times through the real, heyday of farming in Victorian England, fresh fruit in England, 12 months out of the year. I mean, that's an enormous achievement. You were measured on the success of your tenants' farms. You look at people like Robert Bakewell or Jethro Tull, inventor of the seed drill, and they were very, very much caught up in improving the lives of the peasantry, because in this time, hardly anybody lived in the cities. In 1800, 98% of Americans lived on farms and were somehow connected with farming. I should also mention in 1900 that number had fallen in half. Anybody know how many farmers there are in America today? Fewer than 2%. We're not even counted in the census anymore, and we lose 1% of those a year. Think about it. Would you rather be dependent on foreign oil or foreign food? I don't know about you, but I don't have to drive, but I got to eat. So, at any rate, farming was a hugely prestigious occupation, and these men took it very seriously. And when you look at the old agricultural medals, you get people like the Duke of Beaufort, the Prince, the Prince of Wales, the Queen, the King, and their medals for, the best Shire horse, or the best Red Devon ox, or the best Shorthorn, or the best milking Ayrshire. And it was hugely competitive. I mean, it's like now we've got Ferraris, or I don't know what people do to compete these days, but whatever they do. It used to be like a 72-inch TV. I'm so out of popular culture. So when he said farmer, that carried with it a social connotation that we just don't even understand today. And it was respected. And among other things, you were respected as a liberal forward thinker. And I need you to disassociate liberal from what we've gotten ourselves into, the two-party system, because that's a way different thing too. In Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth is thinking about why Mr. Darcy rescued her sister, and she said, he had liberality, he had the means of exercising it, meaning that he was a liberal person in his ideas about helping other people, about the good of common man, about, giving, as a portion of his own personal blessing. And he had the means of exercising it, means that he had money behind it. And George Washington would have been liberal in that sense, liberal in tune with improving the lives of the working poor, and definitely improving the lives of his tenantry, moving the country forward, looking for those things that would come along, like Eli Whitney and cotton gin, not too long after Washington died. So these people were always striving. There was a group at that time in Birmingham, England, called the Lerner Society, and those are the people that Washington would have been communicating with. They were Bolton, Priestley, Watt, Josiah Wedgwood, Erasmus Darwin. They were the thinkers and the leaders of the day, and he would have corresponded with them because in addition to doing scientific study, they would have been doing agricultural study. They would have been doing study in elements and chemistry and physics and all sorts of things. And that's what farmer meant back then. So it wasn't just someone who got dirty a lot and yelled at you for leaving the gates open, right? It carried a whole lot of social meaning. And one of the things behind my study of the women who wrote basically during George Washington's lifetime was that I felt that in reading these things, there were many words that had lost a lot of their meaning, and that's absolutely true. If you read Jane Austen, and you're not really aware of the social context of a lot of these words, I maintain you lose almost all of the beauty of the writing. And I'll give you two words that are my personal favorite in all of Jane Austen's writing: mince pies and landaulette. Changes the whole ending in Persuasion. And you learn by that one word that Austen meant for Captain Wentworth to be her shining hero of all time. And Mr. Darcy is like such a pale second. It's that one word. And I learned that in the course of learning how to drive carriages. So I set up this library so that we could go back and read these novels and try to understand them in a context that would have been known to their readers, which are not known now. And if anybody asks the question, I might tell you why that's the answer. But back to this other thing. When we read these women, and this is about Women's History Month, they were concerned about domestic things. And if you think about it, if you get up in the morning and you go, I got up, what does that mean? Well, to most of us, it means that you have your nammies on and the central heating is on, and you get up and the running water runs, and you wash your teeth, and maybe you take a shower, and you put some other clothes on, wherever they came from, and you go downstairs, you open the fridge, and you eat. Well, the early part of the 19th century, that's not what that looked like. And so if you have people who are writing about domestic scenes and domestic events, and you have no conception of all of those things they didn't write in there, how do you understand what they mean? And here's my other cocktail party question. There were, by the time Jane Austen died in 1817, there had been somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 published women authors writing in English. I mean, there were a few here, there were a few in Australia, there were a few in other places of the empire, but largely in England, a few in Canada. And they wrote somewhere between 10 and 15,000 books. Can anybody name one? The entire literary canon of essentially novels in English, the English novel, has been written without these women. And oddly enough, neither the Bodleian Library in England, which is a repository library, meaning they're supposed to take every book published in England, and the British Library, which is a depository library, which is supposed to take any book published anywhere, took these books. And there are a number of them that have, huge numbers of them, that have simply disappeared. And we have the largest collection now of early women's writing, I think, although it's hard to tell for a lot of reasons, but I think it's probably the largest, or certainly among the largest in the world. And the basis for this book, and the 26 years it took me to write it, is the nexus of that library. I was very lucky to be able to go out and get all of my, initial writings, first-person writings, and save them, and then I gave most of those to Chawton. Some of them went to Mount Vernon. So that's the genesis of this book, and I've tried as hard as I can to make it politically, socially, demographically, geographically, technologically, you name it, correct. And if there's an event or a person in here, there was an analog that existed, at least one of them, not with this name and maybe not in that place. But for example, there's a very strong woman in this book who manages vast estates for her husband, the Earl, because he's off doing something he finds more pleasant. There were women in Washington's time managing vast estates. There were women silversmiths. 2 of the founding members of the British Royal Academy of Art were women. They didn't let any women in for the next 100 years, including, I might add, Beatrix Potter was turned down. So in this time of Washington and his adult life, closely paralleled Austin's adult life, women were kind of at a zenith that they weren't to get to for another probably 200 years. I mean, we're probably ahead of that now, but only just. And when you read Austin, I don't know that anybody senses that feeling of growth and excitement and happiness and really believing that you're the best place, the best time, and you had, Priestley and West Wedgwood and Watt, and, the steam engine had been developed there. They had a rail system, Iron Bridge Gorge. I mean, it was a hugely exciting place to be, and that sort of infectious delight at the new was a new thing, I think, probably ever. I mean, I don't know of another society at that time that had such an unparalleled number of great ideas and moving, the idea that you were really moving humanity forward. And that's very much the idea that underlies this, and that would have been at the back of the minds of Mr. Darcy and General Washington, because they were those men and a few ladies. So I'd like to read from chapter 8, mainly because it doesn't give away any of the rest of the plot. And then I am more than happy to take any of the questions that you have. It's one of the few things I do think I know about. For those of you who have not read Pride and Prejudice lately, Colonel Fitzwilliam is Mr. Darcy's cousin and is joined in custody with Mr. Darcy of Mr. Darcy's much younger sister, Georgiana.